isolation beds for COVID-19 patients. But on Friday, they have reached their full capacity. Of the number, 22 are currently occupied, while some more patients await admission at the emergency room. This prompted the hospital to seek the transfer of COVID positives as well as suspect patients that require admission to other healthcare facilities. Hospital Assistant Director Dr. Jose Madrid says they have already complied with the health department's requirement to allot 20% of their total bed capacity to COVID-related cases. But at this point, they admitted being hard-pressed to accommodate more.
We're still accepting naman to provide initial management. Pero if i-admit yung patient, hirap talaga kami. Hindi kasi namin ma-maximize yung full capacity ng hospital kasi with the recent lockdown ng transportation, may mga wards kami na being occupied by employees din. Pati yung mga nagpa-quarantine naming employees.
Things are likewise difficult for the Lung Center of the Philippines. As a public hospital, it has already allotted more than 30% of its bed capacity for COVID patients per request by the DOH. As one of the first COVID referral hospitals in the metro, they are already dedicating 75% of their total bed capacity to COVID-related cases. While the center has 18 vacant beds as of 7 a.m. today, it is still at a danger zone with 85% of its COVID-dedicated beds now occupied. In response, the DOH says it has intensified the implementation of its One Hospital Command System, which aims to strengthen the referral system among different hospitals.
This system, pinapag-igting din po natin ang coordination ng mga ospital natin with the temporary treatment and monitoring facilities upang mailipat po natin ang mga kasong hindi na nangangailangan ng higher level of care.
Meanwhile, both of these hospitals say they are in need of manpower. Lung Center of the Philippines spokesperson Norberto Francisco says they could use 50 to more than 100 additional nurses.
It's difficult and it's exhausting, it's tiring, but do we have a choice? Wala. We just have to go on. A lot of that is a matter of attitude and behavior and of course compassion.
Charles, for the additional needed nurses, the Commonwealth Hospital said they currently have one nurse for every 5 to 6 patients, while the Lung Center of the Philippines has one nurse for every 3 to 4 patients, and they would need 50 to more than 100 patients in order for them to reach the ideal 1:1 or to 2 nurse to patient ratio. Charles?
Thanks for that, Greg. That was Greg Gregorio joining us live from Mandaluyong. Malacanang says there will be major changes in the government's COVID-19 response. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque promised that the palace will announce these radical changes tomorrow. In a TV interview, Roque also touted the government's plan to conduct pooled testing come August. This means each RT-PCR kit will be used to test a batch of samples collected from up to 20 individuals. If these results come back positive, each person will then be tested individually. Roque said this will cause a major drop in case doubling and reproduction rates while cutting test costs for each person. He said the country will rely less on quarantine classifications and that Metro Manila will be a living experiment for all of these changes. Speaking of changes, more businesses will be allowed to reopen in GCQ areas beginning August 1. These include testing and review centers, gyms, fitness centers, sports facilities, and internet cafes. The same goes for personal care services like spas and waxing salons, aesthetic services such as tattoo and piercing services, pet grooming boutiques, and even drive-in cinemas. Trade Undersecretary Ruth Castelo said these businesses will gradually resume operations at 30% capacity starting next month.
Because we want to help them restart their businesses, provide employment, makasweldo ng tao, and then kumita. But of course, they should also still follow the safety protocols. We cannot afford to be careless.
The House Committee on Ways and Means approves the proposed 12% VAT on digital transactions. Under the new legislation, online companies no longer need to register with the BIR, but a consumption tax will be levied on products and services sold in the country. Committee Vice Chairperson Sharon Garin said the measure levels the playing field for local and international digital service providers.
What we're addressing here lang to local or MSMEs, yung mga small time na nagbebenta, the service providers from outside, diba? Because they're gaining profit from us, from our constituents.
According to Committee Chair Joey Salceda, the move could generate up to 10 billion pesos from digital giants such as Netflix and Lazada. Those with assets less than 3 million pesos are exempt. The bill is now up for further deliberations in the plenary.
Kung dahil ako malaking kumpanya, halimbawa ako Netflix, tapos nagbebenta ako dito sa Pilipinas, wala ka naman choice. So kayang-kaya kong i-pass on. Ngayon, dito sa bago natin, dahil VAT na lang at wala na yung income tax, so wala na sila, there's no income tax being imposed here except for VAT lang talaga.
Thousands of jeepney drivers were able to return to the road today after the LTFRB reopened 17 more routes. For the latest update, we have Gerard de la Peña reporting live from Quezon City. Gerard, what do you have for us?
Well, Charles, more jeepneys were allowed to ply Metro Manila streets once again, but as expected, passengers were hard to come by.
2,000 jeepney drivers were allowed back on the road starting Wednesday after 4 months of suspended operations. The LTFRB opened up 17 more passenger routes in Quezon City, Marikina, Makati, and Manila, and other nearby areas. Operators are required to comply with safety measures prescribed by the IATF. These include mandatory checking of body temperatures, wearing of face masks, shields, and gloves, and operating only at half capacity. Of the more than 200 jeepneys at this terminal in Tandangsora, Quezon City, only 100 were allowed to resume operations. But of that number, only 4 units decided to hit the road again. Drivers anticipated that there won't be a lot of passengers since students are not yet commuting, while others are still hesitant to leave their homes.
Medyo matumal pero maganda na sa wala. Ibang pasahero wala pa lamang, hindi pa nila ganong alam.
But the few passengers who took a jeep today were happy about the money they saved. Before today, they had to hail tricycles that charged between 50 to 100 pesos for a trip, compared to the jeepney's minimum fare of 9 pesos.
Tricycle ang ginagamit talaga, tsaka mahal yung tricycle. 50 pesos ang tricycle.
So dati napapamahal kayo? So ngayon po na meron na nito, anong effect po?
Guminhawa na talaga.
Kung kinakailangan mag-special ng tricycle, ganyan, mahal ng pamasahe.
Inaabot na magkano pag gano'n?
100 po pataas.
Meanwhile, some jeepney drivers in other routes have yet to secure the required QR codes from the LTFRB before they can mount trips again. Others are still in the process of putting up plastic dividers inside their units, as mandated by the government.
Charles, moving forward, the LTFRB will study and will look into the routes to see if there are sufficient modes of transportation serving a particular area. And they will also start adding more routes starting next week, every week, and that would be every week. And this is still part of the agency's so-called calibrated response. Charles.
Thank you, Gerard. That was Gerard de la Peña reporting live from Quezon City. We'll pause for a quick break. One News Now. We'll be right back. Good afternoon, I'm Charles Lejano. You're still watching One News Now. There are now more than 85,000 COVID-19 cases in the country. This after the Health Department reported nearly 1,900 new infections. active cases have now climbed to over 56,000. 16 new deaths were also recorded today, pushing the death count to close to 2,000. Meanwhile, more than 300 patients recovered overnight. So far, nearly 27,000 Filipinos have gotten better from the disease. In Quezon City alone, more than 6,000 infections have been recorded as of Tuesday, with nearly 300 deaths and over 3,000 recoveries. Over in Taiwan, 5 new imported cases were confirmed. 4 of these came from the Philippines. Taiwanese health officials said that 4 patients arrived from Taipei on the same flight on July 26. Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said in a press conference that China will prioritize the Philippines once Beijing develops a vaccine against COVID-19. And the MWSS has had enough of bill shock complaints. It's ordering both Manila Water and Maynila to explain what they've been doing to address the issue. Shaila Francisco tells us more.
Adelaida Castillo wasn't too worried about her water bill, especially since no one was living at her house in Quezon City during the lockdown. But to her shock, her water bill from April to July amounted to a whopping 166,807 pesos, or an average of around 40,000 pesos a month. Before the lockdown, she only pays less than 1,000 pesos monthly for water consumption.
Kinakasama ng loob namin, dahil 3 lang naman po kami dito nakatira, tapos wala pa kami dito 3 buwan, tapos pagdating namin, ganito kalaki yung bill namin.
Maynilad explains this could be an isolated case due to an error in meter reading. The Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System has received over 400 bill shock complaints against Maynilad and Manila Water, prompting the regulator to serve a show-cause order to the 2 water firms, giving them 5 days to explain.
Definitely, if in case of erroneous meter readings, Manila Water or Maynilad needs to resolve that by coming up with the correct billing, and if there's any overpayment, such overpayment should be at least rebated.
Maynilad has received close to 6,000 complaints since June and is reaching out to customers to resolve issues. The firm adds bill-related inquiries and concerns only make up a little over than 1% of its 1.5 million customers.
Sa potential na magiging isolated cases ng error, madali po natin itong ma-reverse at maibigay sa ating mga consumer yung tamang bill nila, dahil sa ang magiging basihan naman natin ay yun pa rin po actual na reading na makikita po nila doon sa kanilang metro.
Manila Water, meanwhile, had over 73,000 customers who asked for clarification. Less than 8,000 cases were endorsed for further investigation, many of which have been resolved by its call center or by business area personnel.
Meron lang tayong kumbaga a very small amount na 57 kumbaga customers na in-adjust natin yung billing. For those na talagang medyo excessive at talagang kinakailangan ng further investigation, which is about 7,900, then we follow a process. No? Majority naman talaga ng mga bills ay talagang tumaas, no? Largely due to the summer season at saka to sa pandemic. And to a large extent, nung binasa natin yung mga bills ay majority din dito ay actual reading. In fact, yung actual reading na yon, merong mga cases doon na there are what we call underground leaks.
The MWSS Regulatory Office tells customers they're not required to pay their bill if they have complaints. Customers are also given until the end of September to settle their bill before services will be disconnected. Shaila Francisco, We Are One News.
Philippine peso bills are getting a makeover. The Bangko Sentral has just released a new set of banknotes that's more secure and responsive for people with visual impairments. The new bills feature visual security cues that will protect against counterfeit. Tactile marks have also been integrated for the elderly and those who have eyesight problems. The security thread now features indigenous weaves from various regions in the country. The BSP clarifies that the current peso notes that were released in 2010 are still legal tender. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. You can also visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. And you can catch One News on the Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime and anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. We are One News.